It seems like everyone's talking about these changes to corporate DEI programs.
Yeah, big names like CitiGroup and PepsiCo are really shaking things up.
Definitely a turning point. These are major companies signaling a potential shift in how companies approach diversity and inclusion.
And if you're enjoying this look at what's happening with corporate DEI rollbacks, be sure to subscribe and give us a like.
Now let's get into the specifics. Citigroup's making some pretty significant changes. They're no longer requiring diverse candidate pools for new hires.
Right, and they've even renamed their entire diversity, equity, and inclusion team to talent management and engagement.
That's a pretty clear move away from a dedicated focus on DEI.
Yeah, and Citigroup's CEO Jane Fraser, she's pointed directly to recent changes in U.S. federal government policy as a driving force behind these decisions.
It's interesting how these legal and political landscapes can directly impact corporate strategies. On the legal front, we have the 2023 Supreme Court ruling against race-conscious admissions programs.
Right, that ruling has made companies wary of any policies that could be seen as giving preferential treatment based on race or ethnicity.
So it's a ripple effect.
For sure. And then there's President Trump's executive order from 2020, which halted federal DEI programs and actually directed agencies to challenge private sector DEI actions they deem illegal.
So there's pressure from both the judicial and executive branches, creating a sort of pincer movement on corporate DEI initiatives.
Exactly. It's a complex environment to navigate.
And it's not just Citigroup PepsiCo's making waves as well. They're completely eliminating the role of their dedicated DEI officer and even sunsetting their workforce representation goals.
Those goals, by the way, were specific targets aimed at increasing the representation of various demographic groups within their workforce. So abandoning them suggests a significant shift in approach.
They're also broadening their supplier base, which signals a move away from specifically sourcing from DEI-focused suppliers.
Now, PepsiCo saying they'll announce a new inclusion for growth strategy, but it's worth noting that anti-DEI activist Robbie Starbuck claims this change is a direct result of his pressure on the company.
That's a pretty potent example of how external stakeholders can exert influence on corporate policies. It raises questions about how much of this shift is driven by genuine internal reflection versus reacting to outside pressures.
These are all important questions, and it's crucial to remember that Citigroup and PepsiCo aren't alone. Companies like Meta, Walmart, and McDonald's are making similar moves.
So this isn't just a couple of isolated incidents. It seems like a much broader trend taking shape. And it's not limited to any particular industry either. Even the financial sector, which has historically been a strong advocate for DEI, is seeing some significant changes.
Absolutely. Goldman Sachs, for example, has dropped its requirement for IPO clients to have diverse boards. They were previously pushing for increased representation of women and minorities in leadership positions.
That's a pretty notable change for a firm like Goldman Sachs. And JP Chase has significantly reduced mentions of diversity, equity, and inclusion in their annual report, almost like they're deliberately downplaying the emphasis on DEI.
It's a striking shift in messaging, and JP Chase's CEO Jamie Dimon has been very vocal about his views on this. He cited legal changes and a desire to cut bureaucracy as reasons for altering their DEI programs.
He's also been publicly skeptical about the effectiveness of bias training and has even questioned the amount of money spent on some DEI initiatives, using some, shall we say, colorful language to express his frustration.
Dimon's bluntness, particularly his use of the phrase stupid shit to describe some DEI spending, has certainly gotten people talking. It raises questions about whether this skepticism is shared by other corporate leaders and how these attitudes might be influencing the current trend of DEI rollbacks.
It's a complex issue with a lot of moving parts. We're seeing companies respond to legal changes, political pressure, and perhaps even internal reviews of their DEI programs. And these adjustments are impacting everything from hiring practices and the structure of DEI teams to overall corporate strategies.
It definitely feels like we're at a crossroads.
So where do we go from here? What does this shift mean for the future of DEI in the corporate world and beyond?
So we've been talking about these corporate DEI rollbacks.
Yeah, but what does this actually mean for the future of DEI in the workplace? That's the big question.
It is a big question. Some people argue that this might actually lead to a more merit-based system, where hiring and promotions are based purely on qualifications.
Just level the playing field, eliminate any perception of bias or favoritism.
Exactly.
But on the flip side, could these rollbacks actually make things worse?
Oh, absolutely.
If companies aren't actively promoting diversity, won't we just end up back where we started with the same power structures and biases dominating?
There's a real danger that all the progress that's been made in recent years could stall out or even reverse,
Right.
Systemic inequalities run deep, and simply removing DEI programs doesn't just magically erase those disparities.
It's like taking the bandage off without actually treating the wound underneath. Things could get even more infected.
That's a great analogy. It's why this whole conversation is so important. We need to really think critically about the consequences of these rollbacks and how we can make sure that equity remains a priority.
So what can companies do then if they're scaling back these formal formal DEI programs, how can they still cultivate workplaces that are truly inclusive and equitable?
Well, it has to start with a genuine commitment from leadership. It's not enough to just talk about diversity. Companies need to actually create cultures where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered to contribute their unique perspectives.
It's about going beyond just checking boxes and quotas and actually weaving inclusion into the very DNA of the company.
Exactly. It takes real work, though. It requires ongoing training and development, open dialogue, and a willingness to confront biases or discriminatory practices head on.
It probably requires a shift in mindset too, right? Instead of seeing DEI as this separate initiative, it needs to be integrated into every single aspect of the business.
Absolutely. From hiring and promotion decisions to leadership development to even supplier selection, DEI considerations should be embedded in the decision-making process at every level.
So it's a holistic approach rather than a standalone program.
Exactly. It's also crucial to measure progress and hold leaders accountable for actually fostering inclusive workplaces. Data and metrics can help identify areas for improvement and track the effectiveness of different initiatives.
Actions speak louder than words. Being able to demonstrate tangible results is key.
Absolutely. And that requires transparency and a willingness to share data both internally and externally. Accountability to employee stakeholders and the community as a whole is essential.
Okay, this all sounds great in theory, but how does it actually play out in practice? Are there companies out there doing this well, even amidst all this bulk of DEI rollbacks?
There are definitely companies out there who are still committed to creating inclusive workplaces, even as they try to navigate these changing legal and political landscapes. For instance, some companies are really focusing on inclusive leadership training, where they equip their leaders with the skills to manage diverse teams and foster a sense of belonging.
So instead of these top-down mandates, they're empowering leaders to drive inclusion from within their teams.
Exactly. And some companies are implementing mentorship programs that are specifically designed to support underrepresented employees, providing them with guidance, sponsorship, and opportunities for advancement.
That sounds like a more targeted approach to addressing the specific barriers that certain groups face.
Right. And it can be really effective. And then there are companies that are emphasizing pay transparency and conducting regular audits to make sure that people are being paid fairly across different demographics.
Okay, so that's a concrete step towards addressing the gender and racial pay gaps that we know still exist in many industries.
Exactly. These are just a few examples, but they illustrate that even with these formal DEI programs being scaled back, there are still ways for companies to prioritize and advance diversity and inclusion.
It seems like the key is intentionality and a genuine commitment to creating a more equitable workplace, even if the approach looks a little different than it did before.
Absolutely. And it requires a willingness to adapt and evolve as this whole landscape continues to shift.
This kind of brings us to the big picture question. What does all of this mean for the future of DEI, not just in corporations, but in society as a whole?
That's the overarching question, isn't it? Yeah, it's a big question with huge implications.
DEI is more than just a corporate buzzword or a box to check off. It's a fundamental principle. It should be woven into everything.
Exactly. We should be striving for equity and inclusion in every single part of our lives: education, healthcare, politics, the justice system, everywhere.
We need to be creating a world where everyone truly has an equal chance at success, no matter their background or identity.
Right. And these corporate rollbacks might feel like a setback, but it's so important to not lose sight of that bigger picture.
This is a time to step back and really think critically about how to move forward, how to be creative, and find new and innovative ways to push for progress.
We need to keep these conversations going, keep pushing back against the status quo, and hold each other accountable for creating a more just and equitable world.
It's not about pointing fingers or placing blame. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in changing the systems that create inequality.
And recognizing that this isn't just the responsibility of corporations or governments, it's a collective effort that requires everyone to step up and put in the work.
The work of DEI is never really over. It's an ongoing process of learning, unlearning, and relearning.
It's about being willing to have those tough conversations, to truly listen and learn from one another, and to challenge our own biases.
And to realize that progress isn't always a straight line.
Right? There will be setbacks, there will be challenges, but that doesn't mean we give up.
This conversation has been so insightful, and I hope it encourages our listeners to keep thinking about this really complex issue.
Me too. It's important to remember that change doesn't happen overnight. It takes consistent effort, collaboration, and a true commitment to building a future where every single person has the opportunity to thrive.
Thanks for joining us for this look at a changing landscape of corporate DEI. We'll keep you updated on this evolving situation, but until next time, keep those critical thinking caps on.